IFRS 16 requires lessees to capitalize all leases, with a couple of exceptions. And when you capitalize a lease, you not only recognize a lease liability on the statement of financial position, the lessee also has to record a right-of-use asset on the statement of financial position. So even though it's not taking legal title or ownership of the thing that it's leasing, it still books it as an asset on the statement of financial position. The question is, what amount does it record for that right-of-use asset? Well, we're going to start with the initial measurement of the lease liability, and then we're going to make some adjustments to it to calculate the right-of-use asset at the commencement of the lease. Now, how do you calculate the lease liability, the initial lease liability, commencement of the lease? I've got another video showing you how to do that. Long story short, it is the present value of the expected lease payments, okay? So you get that initial measurement of the lease liability, and then you add in any lease prepayments. Those are payments from the lessee to the lessor prior to the commencement of the lease. Okay, so those are going to increase the right-of-use asset. Those will get added to the initial measurement of the lease liability when calculating our right-of-use asset. Now, you're also going to add any initial direct costs incurred by the lessee. I've got another video explaining what initial direct costs are, but long story short, they are costs that would not exist but for the execution of the lease. So any initial direct costs borne by the lessee are added, and they will increase the right-of-use asset. Now, if there's any cost to dismantle, remove the asset, restore the site, those costs are also going to increase the right-of-use asset. Let me just give you an example so it's a little more intuitive. Let's say that you lease, you're renting a piece of land, and you set up a gas station there, and you have underground storage tanks. Okay, you have underground storage tanks, and then when your lease is up, you are required to remove those and get those out of there, okay, and restore the site to its original condition before you started leasing it. Okay, those costs, that's what I'm talking about here. Those costs would increase your right-of-use asset, okay? So prepayments, initial direct costs, and any cost to dismantle or restore the site, remove equipment, all these costs are going to increase the right-of-use asset and get added to that lease liability. Now, if the lessee receives any incentives from the lessor, then those are going to be subtracted in calculating the right-of-use asset. Okay, those are going to be deducted. An example would be the lessor is trying to get the lessee to sign the lease, and they say, listen, if you sign the lease right now, we will give you 500 euros, right? Doesn't that sound great? Here's 500 euros, just sign this piece of paper. So that would be an incentive from the lessor to the lessee that would be subtracted when calculating the right-of-use asset. So, pretty straightforward. You start with the initial measurement of lease liability, add prepayments, initial direct costs, any costs of restoring the site, dismantling equipment, and then you subtract incentives received from the lessor, and that will be the initial measurement of the right-of-use asset, and that will go on the lessee's statement of financial position. So, let's do an example. Let's say we've got Company A. They are the lessee. They're going to rent equipment for 4 years. The lease term starts on January 1st, 2025, and that will also be the date of the first payment. They're going to make annual payments of $9,000, so you're going to have 4 payments of $9,000. Let's assume the lessor's implicit interest rate is 3%, and let's assume that the lessee knows that. They know what the lessor's implicit interest rate is, so then the lessee will use 3% when doing the discounting and the present value calculations to figure the initial measurement of the lease liability. Now, there's no guaranteed residual value here to speak of, right? So the lessee has not made any guarantees about what the residual value will be at the end of the lease. Prior to the commencement of the lease, Company A prepays $3,000. So we mentioned that that is going to increase the right-of-use asset. Now, Company A also incurred $5,000 in initial direct costs related to lease. Those are also going to be added. That is also going to increase. So $3,000 and $5,000 are going to be added to the initial lease liability when calculating the right-of-use asset at the beginning of the lease. So our initial measurement of lease liability, I've already done the calculations for you, $34,457. If you want to know how to calculate the lease liability, I encourage you to check out the video that I made on that. So we got $34,457. That's the present value of the lease payments. Now we had a lease prepayment of $3,000, so that gets added. We add the initial direct costs of $5,000. So this plus this is $42,457. So the lessee would record a right-of-use asset on their statement of financial position of $42,457 at the commencement of the lease.